Hi everybody. So I've been meaning to talk about this topic for a while now, but I wasn't sure how to hit the right tone. It is about personal boundaries and how to keep ourselves safe in a way when we are collecting things. In this case, of course, we are talking about decks of cards. I'm in the process of reviewing my collection, and I've spoken about which one I've given up, which one I've moved along, which one I'm keeping. And I have moved along, gifted, traded, sold a lot of decks, a lot more now than I've ever had released. I've been collecting for only about 3 years. And of course, that was unplanned. It all started with one deck. And once you see all these beautiful art, these fascinating stories, which have been presented to you, it's like part of it is like buying a book. You want to hear more of these stories. But the other part of it, it's like buying clothing and shoes and bags and pretty things. They are beautiful to look at, they're wonderful to touch, to smell, to shuffle, and it makes you feel good. And people say, well, scientists really said that when you feel these pleasant emotions, I believe they are serotonin, or is it dopamine, or is it both? One of those. It's been a while, I can't remember. But something to do with your neurotransmitter in the brain, in your nervous system. And so, like eating chocolate, it releases it. Like running, jogging, apparently releases that too. And so, like sugar as well, apparently, and fat. And so we seek it. And naturally, we are built a certain way. We are, in the course of the evolution of our species, we have been naturally selected to be a certain way because those things are adaptive to us. Those things allow us to adapt to our environment and to continue to exist as a species. But like all adaptive mechanism, it can become dysfunctional. It can become, a little lopsided. And as I've said in my introduction video that I did early this year, I'm only here, I can only bear testimonies to my own personal thoughts, feelings, and experiences. So this is what I'm doing now. I am sharing what I have been thinking for myself and what I've experienced for myself. I have an obsessive compulsive tendencies. I don't have a clinical condition. It hasn't affected my life in a harmful or dysfunctional way, but I have that tendency. I think I got that from my mother's side of the family, who are all a bit on the anxious side, and she in turn seems to have received that gene from her mother. So it's my maternal grandmother's line. As these things go, part of it is genetic, part of it is a predisposition, and one of those predisposition is genetic. There are other things, but then these predisposition, for them to translate into outward behavior, have to be triggered. There has to be a sense of something that triggered it, and once it's triggered, there has to be something that sustained that behavior. I hesitate to use the word addiction because it is a very complex situation involving psychological, biological, and social element, each of which are very complex in itself. But for the purposes of this video, let's use the word addiction in a non-clinical way, in a non-judgmental way. let's use the term obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, in a casual way, not in a clinical sense. And and so speaking of dysfunction and harmful, I've left psychological practice a long time ago, over a decade ago. So I am not, I don't want to put myself out there as an expert or anything. Once more, I can only speak for myself, my experiences, my feelings, and my thoughts. Harmful dysfunction is a term that I found very useful. When we talk about collecting decks, for instance, I am unapologetic about collecting decks, as you know, unapologetic. And we often say that we can't judge, quote unquote, whether it is dysfunctional or harmful for someone because it's highly contextual. It is highly contextual in terms of especially those three, the social, psychological, and biological, but also there is another element, financial, which I suppose is part of social and biological and psychological to a certain extent, really. And we do not know how much is too much for someone, financially, psychologically, socially, or biologically. And there is a reason why there is a dedicated profession to deal with addiction or with mental health in general, because human behaviors are quite complex, really. It's an interaction of various things, and each case is highly unique. But this concept of harmful dysfunction, I found, is a really good one. If something is harmful and dysfunctional, then it is problematic. Then it is a problem. It is as easy as that. Is it harmful? Is it dysfunctional? Ask ourselves that. Financially, psychologically, socially, biologically. And I suppose in a sense of casual addiction or casual OCD, if even there is such a thing, I do not want to belittle those conditions because they're pretty serious if harmful and dysfunctional. But let's say for casual talk, in terms of that situation, the easiest to spot or the easiest to put your finger on is the social aspect of it. You can, how should I put it? We have to be vigilant because psychologically, biologically, financially, you can argue that you can be self-determined. But if we are not aware of the social aspects of our tendencies as well, it's not fair to say that the social aspects of our tendency would be the most challenging because, again, it depends on each individual person. But the only thing that we have control over on a communal level, I suppose, is the social aspect of it. We have no insight or direct access or knowledge of someone's mental, physical, and financial state unless you are in a position to. I'm talking online communities, right? So in a communal sense, on an online platform, the easiest of all those variables that we have access to is the social aspect of it. And this is where I struggle, where in maintaining a position of the freedom for each individual to choose what is best for them, and my responsibility as an accountable member of a community. And I've spoken about accountability a lot in the past, but I was never specific about it because it's very hard to be specific about it. But the one thing that I am still grappling with, I have embraced a lot of the aspects of the online community and online friendship, as if you've seen my other video. But it is the aspect of accountability that I'm still struggling with. In a face-to-face, and again, I use the term face-to-face because you can be online and face-to-face these days, but in a physical, direct face-to-face interaction in a traditional sense of community, not online, offline, there are often an element of accountability that you can't escape from because society have been built over the course of centuries with certain kind of norms and rules and regulations which are functional to each of those society in order for those societies to survive. And this understanding the social contract provides us with a sense of accountability. And so I find this topic really hard to talk about. So 2 points, I guess, is the idea of harmful dysfunction and the idea of accountability. So those are the 2 main points, really. I'm forming my thoughts as I'm talking here, so please bear with me. Boundaries, addiction, and obsessive compulsive tendencies and anxiety spectrum of this whole thing. What I'm trying to say is that addiction is often associated with the anxiety side of the spectrum. And this means it is often interlinked, not always, with obsessive compulsive tendencies, with anxiety, with a tendency to be anxious, and these are on a personal psychological side of things for us to be vigilant. On the social side of it is accountability, and I can't speak to the biological side of it, not so much. I cannot speak to the financial side of it, not at all actually, because an amount of money spent every month is not in itself sufficient to deem something to be dysfunctional without taking into consideration the context of how much is that in proportion of their monthly income, for example. So I can only speak about the psychological and the social, because the psychological is within ourselves. We can try to monitor that. And for that, I would like to share with you this idea of harmful dysfunction. On the social side of it, I suppose, what I'm saying is that people who are friends and family, people who are around us, we have to be accountable to somebody. And the 12 steps program work exactly that way. You have a sponsor, I think, or a buddy, I can't quite remember, but what that provides is accountability. So I'm not quite sure if I'm getting this across, but if anything, I would like to leave you with 2 things. One is harmful dysfunction as a measuring stick, as a line that you can visibly see, so that when you cross it, you know you've crossed it. And speaking of crossing lines, that's the other thing. These kinds of tendencies are very gradual in nature. By the time you realize you crossed the line, you've crossed it. Because of its nature, because of its gradual nature, you kind of know it's coming, but you probably won't know as you are approaching that line, if that makes sense. You kind of know on a theoretical sense there is a line, but there is no sense of approaching that line until you've crossed it. And by the time you've crossed it, you've crossed it. And that is also why it is often the case with addiction that people have to hit rock bottom before they are ready to start their recovery process, because until you cross that line, you didn't even realize that you are very, very close to the line. you didn't even realize that you needed to retreat. So I guess that's the third or fourth point. And so, I don't know, it's just that the conversation lately around the community, or this loosely defined community of ours here online, have provided an opportunity for me to finally say this. And I am saying this from a position of personal experience and of personal reflection for myself over the course of many years, and as a result of also observing and witnessing on a personal level these various tendencies. And so yeah, I hope that is of any use. I have no idea if I'm making sense, but I can clarify any points that you may wish me to clarify. I don't know. I'll do another video or whatever, but yeah, so I'll talk to you guys later.